Surprise! Bet you weren't expecting this. Welcome back, friends. Before we get started, I thought that rather than have a featured artist, I'd like to dedicate this episode to Wigs for Kids. It's a great organization where you can donate your hair to children with cancer undergoing chemotherapy. This is the second time I've had the opportunity to donate my hair, and it's a very worthy cause for those of you who are interested. I'll provide a link at the end of the episode and in the description section below. In this episode, we're going to finish up with the sight reading of rhythms in 4/4 by quickly going through the rest of the exercises in my book and exploring the various possible permutations of the 43 subdivisions. After we finish today, it's up to you to practice the rest of these exercises. Put in at least 10 minutes of practice on these a day. These exercises, along with the major and minor scales you've learned, will allow us to go much further and faster in future episodes as they are foundational. To this end, let's begin with exercise 3, where we'll take each one of these 43 subdivisions and hear how they sound on every beat of a 4/4 bar. So let's get started. Let's begin with exercise 3, where we'll take each one of these 43 subdivisions and hear how they sound on every beat of a 4/4 bar. So here we go. In exercise 4, we'll take each one of those 43 subdivisions and place each one next to every other one of the 43 subdivisions over beats 1 and 2 only. We will begin by placing the 2 eighth note subdivision, the first one listed in exercise 2, next to itself first over beats 1 and 2, then next to the other 42 subdivisions. So for example, in bar 2, we've got the eighth note subdivision on beat 1 again, followed by the 4/16 subdivision on beat 2, which is the second subdivision listed in exercise 2. We're only going to go through the first example of exercise 4 only, namely the 2/8 subdivision on beat 1. These exercises last a long time, so it's up to you to practice the rest. So let's find out how this sounds. Notice in the second example of exercise 4 that the 4/16 note subdivision is always on beat 1 and that each one of the 43 subdivisions is placed next to it on beat 2. This concept is carried through all of exercise 4 until each one of the 43 subdivisions is placed next to each of the 43 subdivisions on beats 1 and 2. In exercise 5, I discuss what I call identical attack families. This is not really an exercise per se, but rather serves to draw awareness of similar rhythms in the 43 subdivisions. It is designed to hopefully make your sight reading easier at faster tempos. The attacks of the examples in this exercise sound the same. They are similar rhythms. You would have difficulty distinguishing an eighth rest from a 16th rest at a fast tempo, especially with the resonation from an instrument body, such as the cavity in an acoustic bass. Even computer software often confuses rhythms with similar attacks when converting a file from one format to another, such as from Pro Tools to Sibelius, by guessing durations. Generally, it isn't the decay that people hear when you make a mistake, it's the attacks. In other words, you don't usually notice the decay times for notes at very fast tempos. It's usually only at slow tempos that the decays start to become more important, which is also when you have more time to think about them. Notice how each of these families has the same attacks, but the decays differ. There are 14 families along with 7 more subdivisions that don't belong to any of those families. My obvious intention here is to show the subdivisions with similarities and perhaps make it seem a little less daunting to learn these rhythms. Does it help? I hope so. I'd certainly be very interested to hear your comments on whether it helps or not. Why don't we take a listen to each of these families now? Here's the first family. You will only hear the subdivision on beat 1. Here we go. Here's family number 2. Family number 3. Family number 4. Family number 5. Family number 6. Family 7. Family 8. Family 9. Family 10. Family 11. Family 12. Family 13. And finally, Family 14. The remaining 7 subdivisions don't belong to any of the prior families. Here's how these sound. In exercise 6, we take each of the 43 subdivisions and tie each one to every one of the 43 subdivisions over beats 1 and 2 only. We'll begin by tying the 2 eighth note subdivision to itself over beats 1 and 2, and then to all the other 42 subdivisions when possible. I say when possible because some subdivisions have rest at the beginning or at the end, making a tie impossible. Because of this, there are actually only 27 possible subdivisions that can be tied together. These exercises will prepare you to read all the possible common tied subdivisions over beats 1 and 2. So, let's hear how these sound. In exercise 6, example 2, we tie the 4/16th note subdivision to each of the other subdivisions, where possible, over beats 1 and 2, and then we continue with all of the various permutations of tied subdivisions over beats 1 and 2 for the remainder of exercise 6. Here's how this sounds. What do we do for the rest of the book? Basically the same thing you just did over beats 1 and 2, only we move it over to beats 2 and 3 as shown here, then beats 3 and 4, and finally 4 and 1. Exercise 13 is for you overachievers out there and is basically asking you to rewrite the exercises using alternate methods of notation, but honestly, they're so rare that you're probably just fine not doing this exercise. Syncopation is placing emphasis on or accenting weak beats or the weak part of a beat. In this first example, we see the weak beats being accented. The next example demonstrates an emphasis on the weak part of the beat. Swung eighth notes come from jazz notation. The eighth notes as you have learned them so far are called straight eighth notes to a jazz musician. However, when a piece of music has the word swing or swung written on it, the feel of the eighth notes will become more of a triplet feel, where the first eighth note is a quarter note triplet that is followed by an eighth note triplet as shown here. Let's listen to measure 1 straight. Measure 2 has the implied feel that you're expected to perform. This is how this sounds. Some music software has the ability to interpret a swung eighth note performance without changing the notation. In measure 3, for example, there's a 3-measure phrase that's written as straight eighth notes. This is what it sounds like. We can make our eighth notes feel swung by simply making an adjustment in Sibelius's preferences. Let's do that now. Here's what this sounds like. If you recall, earlier in the book I introduced quarter note and half note triplets. These can be fairly difficult to feel, however, as illustrated here. That was the quarter notes. Here's the half note triplet. There is a trick, however, in playing these accurately. The first thing you need to do is hear the underlying eighth note triplets on each beat as shown here. Let's hear how these sound. Normally, if you were to play these eighth triplets with 2 hands, you might play the downbeats with 1 hand and the 2 other eighth triplets with the other hand like this. Go ahead and try this while this plays. So here's the trick. Instead of grouping them in 3 like shown here, look up here. We've got triplets just like we have down here, but they're grouped in sets of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So basically, you would go from this to this. And as it so happens, those triplets grouped in 2 happen to line up with the quarter note triplets. Let's listen to this now. This is what it would look like with 2 hands beating on your chest. Whichever hand you start the pattern with, in this case my right hand, happens to coincide with each quarter note triplet. Now let's look at half note triplets. How do you execute these? Instead of grouping them in 2 as above, these triplets are grouped in 4. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, and notice where every accent is. So this would be, in my case, my right hand, left, 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 right, left, 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 and so on. Let's hear how this sounds first. And if we play along, remember, 1 beat here, 3 beats here. Here we go. That should make it easier to perform both of these. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like and leave a comment below if you have any questions. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you're interested in donating your hair, please visit Wigs for Kids at this link.